on a bright summer morning in the Dolomites, where jagged limestone peaks rose like ancient fortresses above lush valleys carpeted in green. Markus Vogel, a 48-year-old office worker from Innsbruck, Austria, pulled into a gravel trailhead parking lot with a mixture of anticipation and stubborn determination. For this was not just a hike for him, it was a personal mission, something he had been talking about for months at his office, with his hiking club, and even at family dinners, claiming that he would finally conquer one of the Dolomites' legendary Via Ferrata routes, those dangerous iron paths that zigzag along near vertical cliffs, remnants of World War I engineering, now magnets for adventurers who wanted to test both their courage and their endurance. Markus was not a professional mountaineer, far from it, but he was fit enough, experienced on small mountain trails, and he carried with him that heady mixture of confidence and pride that can be both an engine for achievement and a recipe for disaster. His wife often reminded him that his stubborn streak was a double-edged sword, an admirable drive in his career and family life, but sometimes an infuriating refusal to listen, when caution would have been wiser. That morning, as the sun lit up the white-gray limestone cliffs like a cathedral, and cowbells rang faintly from pastures below, Markus breathed in the crisp alpine air and told himself this would be his day of triumph. A story he would tell his grandchildren someday. But his determination collided almost immediately with an obstacle he had not expected. Bright red signs plastered at the trailhead in Italian, German, and English, warning in bold letters, "Trail closed due to rockfall risk." A young ranger stood nearby in a wooden hut, patiently repeating to arriving hikers that storms earlier that week had loosened rocks from above, making the Via Ferrata too dangerous to attempt until inspections and repairs could be carried out. Some hikers groaned in disappointment and turned back. Some asked about alternative trails, but Markus felt his jaw tighten, his pride rising like a wall against reason. He had driven 4 hours for this, had prepared for weeks, had bragged to colleagues, had built up the climb in his mind as a test of his own spirit. How could he now accept being told no by a ranger half his age? He muttered under his breath, "It looks fine to me," convincing himself that officials always exaggerated risks. But they erred on the side of paranoia, and without another thought, he tightened his boots, strapped his harness, clipped the carabiners to his belt with a metallic snap, and marched past the barrier with the kind of stride that radiated defiance. I know better. The early part of the trail seemed to prove him right, winding gently through flower-filled meadows where butterflies hovered and the distant clang of cowbells mingled with birdsong, the kind of idyllic alpine landscape that lulled the heart into a false sense of security. Markus even paused to take selfies, already composing the captions he would later post online, something about conquering challenges or embracing adventure. As the trail climbed higher, the meadows gave way to scree and cliffs, and soon Markus stood at the base of the Via Ferrata itself, where iron rungs jutted out from the stone face like skeletal ladders and a steel cable ran upward, promising both support and danger. He clipped in, adjusted his gloves, and began to climb, the metal cold beneath his palms, slick with moisture that lingered from recent rains. At first the climb thrilled him. The valley spread out below like a painting, the sky so blue it looked unreal, the wind crisp against his face, and every step upward felt like proof that he had been right to ignore the warnings. Yet as he climbed higher, hours passing slowly, the weather shifted. Thin veils of cloud gathered, thickened, and swallowed the sun, and the cheerful warmth of the morning gave way to a gray gloom that seemed to drain the color from the cliffs. Markus stopped on a narrow ledge, sipped from his water bottle, and tried to ignore the unease coiling in his stomach. Then it happened. A sharp, violent crack echoed above, like the sound of a gunshot in a cathedral, followed by a hail of small stones clattering down the cliff. One pinged loudly against his helmet. Another tore a hole in his sleeve, and Markus froze, his chest tightening with sudden panic as the ranger's warnings came back to him with cruel clarity. He pressed himself against the stone, heart pounding, when a larger boulder, dislodged by the mountain itself, crashed down just meters away, smashing against the iron rungs, bending them, tearing the path into ruin. The way forward was gone, the way back nearly as treacherous, the metal slippery, the drops dizzying. Markus realized with terrifying clarity that he was trapped. Trapped not only by the mountain's indifference, but by his own pride. By the reckless choice that had brought him here. His hands shook as he pulled his phone from his pocket, praying for a signal, and to his shock, a single bar flickered in the corner of the screen. With trembling fingers, he dialed emergency services, his voice hoarse, his German broken with panic, as he explained he was stuck on a via ferrata, that rocks were falling, that he could not move. The operator's calm voice steadied him slightly. "Stay where you are, sir. Do not attempt to climb. Mountain rescue is on its way." Markus pressed himself against the cliff, each minute stretching into an eternity, his mind torturing him with images of the cable snapping, of another boulder striking, of never seeing his wife and children again. Meanwhile, at an alpine rescue base, miles away, his call triggered swift, decisive action. Trained rescuers, veterans of Europe's harshest terrain, loaded their gear, ropes, helmets, harnesses, medical kits, into a helicopter, their faces grim with the knowledge that such missions were as dangerous for them as for those they sought to save. "We've got a climber trapped on a closed via ferrata," the dispatcher reported. "Rockfall risk high, weather worsening, altitude around 2,300 meters. The pilot frowned. Flying into narrow Dolomite canyons with shifting winds and unstable cliffs was a nightmare, but there was no choice. Within minutes, the helicopter's rotors thundered to life, blades cutting the mist, the machine lifting into the cloudy sky, with the lives of both Markus and his rescuers hanging in balance. Back on the cliff, Markus heard the distant thump, thump, thump of approaching rotors, and tears blurred his eyes with relief, yet fear surged as well. For the helicopter's downdraft rattled stones loose, its noise magnified in the canyon like thunder, and Markus realized with crushing guilt that rescuers were risking their lives because of his arrogance. Then came the sight, a rescuer in bright orange gear being lowered on a winch, swinging like a pendulum, shouting instructions through a megaphone. "Stay still, don't panic, we are coming to get you." Markus nodded frantically, too dry-throated to reply, arms trembling with fatigue. At last, the rescuer reached him, clipped him securely to the harness, and gave the signal. The ascent was harrowing, swinging in the wind, scraping against the cliff, spinning as the winch reeled them upward. Markus's stomach lurched, his heart thundered, but then, with a rush of air and noise, he was pulled into the cabin. He collapsed onto the floor, gasping, whispering "Danke, danke," again and again as rescuers checked his vitals, offering water, steadying his shaking hands. At the base, doctors confirmed no broken bones, only scrapes, bruises, dehydration, and the early onset of hypothermia. But the greater blow came when officials explained the financial reality. Because Markus had ignored posted warnings and bypassed a closed trail, his insurance would not cover the rescue. He was personally liable for the entire cost, nearly $16,000. The figure hit him harder than any falling stone, an avalanche of shame, fear, and regret. Soon, newspapers across Europe splashed the story across headlines. "Hiker ignores warnings, $16,000 rescue in Dolomites. Online debates raged. Some argued Markus was simply unlucky. Others condemned him as selfish, pointing out rescuers had risked their lives for his prideful defiance. At home in Innsbruck, his wife wept both with relief and fury, scolding him for gambling with his life, for nearly leaving their children fatherless, their grandchildren without a grandfather. His hiking club friends shook their heads, some supportive, some blunt in their criticism, reminding him that he had embarrassed himself and put others in danger. Markus, humbled beyond words, admitted publicly that he had been wrong, that pride had clouded his judgment, that no view, no thrill, no moment of conquest was worth such risk. He gave interviews urging others to respect warning signs, confessing that the mountain had shown him his smallness, his fragility, his mortality, and yet late at night, when he closed his eyes, the memories returned. The crack of stone above, the dizzying drop below, the feeling of being one slip away from death. His survival was a miracle, his debt a heavy burden. But his story spread like wildfire, told in lodges, whispered by guides, repeated by families, to loved ones who considered ignoring signs. Pride can kill, his story reminds. Signs exist for a reason, and sometimes the cost of ignoring them is not only money, but life itself, or the lives of those brave enough to save you.